Hello and welcome to ATARC's Digital Transformation Virtual Summit. For those who do not know, my name is Kirsten Patton and I'm the Working Group Program Manager here at ATARC. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we are a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would first like to thank our partners over at ServiceNow, Red Hat, Zscaler, and BeyondTrust for helping us create today's summit. Additionally, I would like to thank you all at home for joining us. Today will be an informative event focused on federal digital transformation. Up first, I would like to introduce our visionary keynote, the Digital Transformation Officer over at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Jill Merlot. Jill, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Kirsten, and thank you to ATARC, everybody there, for the opportunity to be with you today, and thanks to everybody for joining us. I think it's going to be a great day. As Kirsten said, I got this invitation to do a visionary keynote, and I smiled a little bit when I saw that because I thought, hey, no pressure. You look at the agenda, there's some excellent topics and experts gathered for panels today. And I thought to myself, what topic could I share to tee up in a visionary way? And then I realized that really vision is the topic that any digital transformation discussion must begin with. And so what do I mean by that? We all know we're here to discuss digital transformation, but for many of our customers and our stakeholders, that term is still very much a buzzword. A lot of them would jump right to definitions of DT or digital transformation that involve automation or data analytics or artificial intelligence, things like that. And while those things are certainly key digital tools in our DT toolbox, they are not by themselves DT or digital transformation. They just represent the digital part of digital transformation. The other half of DT, and I'd argue probably the more important part, is transformation. And when we define transformation, at least at NASA, we talk about radically changing a product, a process, or capability so dramatically that it's not recognizable compared to its traditional form. So digital transformation then is about employing the explosion of digital technologies to bring about that radical change. We all know that, there's many reasons why people are transforming, and especially digitally transforming now, but the linkage there, I think, is important. We have to transform because these digital advances are making it possible to create new value for our customers and our constituents that people didn't even know they wanted or needed. They're expecting services from government in new ways now that they never would have known that they needed before. And the same is true for our partners in industry and academia and even nonprofits. And what's true across the board is that the folks that are taking advantage of DT are either growing in relevance or revenue, and those who are not are losing ground. So if digital transformation is about harnessing all that power of digital to architect a transformation, the very first question we must ask, and we should be able to answer as DT leaders, is what do we need to transform to? In my opinion, that's really the central question for any DT initiative. And it's why I believe that vision is the topic that has to precede any event or any true discussion about digital transformation. Because if you do not know what change you're trying to bring about, then your digital strategy is more likely to be more of a digitization than a true digital transformation strategy. So how have we answered that question at NASA? What are we striving to transform to? Well, we're relatively young. Enterprise Digital Transformation at NASA was formally launched as an agency initiative just a little over a year ago. And my role as the NASA Digital Transformation Officer was created then to lead the initiative, and Ron Thompson, who's our Chief Data Officer, was joining me as the co-lead. And the very first thing that we did was we met with every senior leader at NASA to get their insights on how NASA needed to change, what was keeping them up at night in terms of where we needed to pivot. And there was plenty. I'll run down just a few of the macro ones, right? Anybody that's read a headline about NASA lately always comes back to questions about, our friends at SpaceX and how human spaceflight is changing. Well, the truth is we have a thriving space economy now, which means that certain operations need to transition over to that private sector, and NASA needs to turn its attention to the next set of challenges, things like our goals for the moon and Mars when it comes to human spaceflight. In science, we're pushing the limits of discovery in the universe. We just launched the James Webb Space Telescope, but simultaneously working with global science teams to understand climate change using new approaches like swarm satellites and merging of data sets across multiple kinds of satellite missions. And same thing is true in aviation. There's all kinds of new advances like electric propulsion and autonomous vehicles that are really launching a global race to transform how we do everything from package delivery to point-to-point urban transportation, to faster, cleaner, more affordable solutions for big transports. And all of that's requiring NASA to work with new technology providers as well as traditional industry alongside our certification agencies. So a lot of change in the air for NASA. No question that we have some things that we need to pivot on. And so what we did is we synthesized what we heard from them. And that was that while our amazing mission is enduring, and our mission really is amazing, it's to reach new heights and reveal the unknown to benefit all humankind. It's not every day you get to decide that you're going to do that after breakfast. But while that's enduring, our environment is radically changing. And these were the themes that we heard from those senior leaders. We're looking at increasingly bold and complex missions. We're having to do that in an increasingly partnered way. We're being asked to do that increasingly fast and increasingly more affordable. People want it for cheaper. We need to do that in an increasingly transparent way, and we need to be increasingly inclusive. In other words, inviting more people to participate on the NASA journey. So there really was universal awareness that all of this means that NASA needs to change. And so what we did is we worked with those senior leaders to unpack exactly what that change needed to look like. And we set those up as our top level digital transformation goals and objectives. And so it really boils down to three things. The first thing is we need to transform the way we work. And under the hood of that is we need to improve complex decision making. We need to make partnering a whole lot easier. We need to speed our delivery. We need to increase our interdisciplinary innovation, meaning bringing data and technologies together to create breakthroughs. And we need to increase the way we're engaging the public and our stakeholders. So all of that is transforming the way that we work. Our second goal is we need to transform the experience of our workforce. The folk, especially coming into the workplace, have different expectations than, say, a generation or two ago. And so we need to enhance the employee engagement, meaning how connected they feel to our mission. We need to be able to expand their capabilities, and that includes new digital skill sets, among other things. And we need to be able to maximize employee productivity, meaning that they spend their time and their talent on things that really do require humans to do the analysis and the insight building versus some of the more routine tasks. Our third goal is that we need to transform the agility of our workplace. And this is really all about improving our operational readiness and agility. We, like many agencies, have some aging infrastructure, and so we need to address that. We need to make it easier to team. And these days, that's especially born of things like making sure that we know how to be effective in a hybrid work environment where some people are going to be on site and some people are going to be at a remote location. And then finally, we need to re-architect our processes that work together. So those are our top line goals. Those are really the attributes of the change that we're trying to create. Transform the way we work, transform the experience of our workforce, and transform the agility of our workplace. So you may have noticed that these goals and objectives are non-digital, and that is quite intentional. Again, we are not doing digital for digital's sake. We're doing digital transformation to drive the change at NASA, and those top line goals outline what that change needs to look like. And in fact, it's our top level business imperative for change. So to get taken together, these things really outline our vision for what we're trying to transform into. So from there, from those goals and objectives, we laid in our DT plans. And you're going to hear more. I'm not going to steal their thunder, but you'll hear more about our plans from Matt Dosberg, who's on the roadmap panel, and how we derive specific project initiatives as our first target to create that change that I just described. And you'll hear about one of those projects, our enterprise data portal, from Ron Thompson, who's going to be on the data panel, and how it's going to help us improve our complex decision making. So at the end of the day, our intent is to measure the success of our DT initiative against two key dimensions. First, we're going to measure our progress on achieving those transformation outcomes that are really described in our goals and objectives. And that's a measure of whether or not we're pursuing the right things with our transformation effort. Are we actually following our vision? And then the second thing we'll measure is our digital maturity, which is really a measure of our ability to do those things right, those key activities right, in terms of harnessing the digital advances to affect that change. So using these two dimensions to measure our progress, we'll make sure that we stay true to our digital transformation vision, to make sure that what we are doing is truly digital transformation, meaning we're harnessing the power of digital advances to transform NASA and not just digitizing the work that we have always done. So hopefully our NASA story has illustrated this key point. And I'll just reiterate it again. When we talk digital transformation, transformation's the goal and digital is the lever to help get us there. And so all of us really must, as DT leaders, start by clearly defining the vision, or in other words, that business imperative for transformation, and then build our digital roadmaps to help us create that change. And then we'll come back to that vision time and again to measure our progress on the journey. So I just want to say thank you again to ATARC for having me. And I am really looking forward to the rest of the day to learn how others are translating their DT vision into roadmaps for change.
Thank you so much, Jill. We really appreciate it, and we hope to have you back again soon. Up next, we will be hearing from our first emerging technology talk of the day, this time by Kevin Tunks. Kevin is a technology advisor and application architect over at Red Hat. Kevin, over to you.
Hi, I'm Kevin Tunks. I'm Red Hat's National Technical Advisor and Acting Chief Architect for North America State and Local Government. I am so happy to be here with you today to talk about digital transformation trends and share with you 3 insights that I really gleaned from traveling that might be really applicable to managing the chaos of digital transformation expectations in 2022. I hope you join me for a short conversation around this and have some questions. So 2020, 2021, the pandemic years really have been an interesting space. We've gone through a tremendous number of changes. The chaos and disruption that has caused is really unprecedented in recent memory. And so there's a few other areas that I think it's really valuable to pull insights from that have a lot of chaos that may be applicable and help you define your 2022 roadmap. In particular, an area that is often chaotic is travel. And whether that's for pleasure or business or adventure, travel's a fantastic analogy for how we think about that concept of a journey that we've now started to really talk about when we talk about digital modernizations. It's a journey. There's no final destination to it. It's just sort of an ongoing, continuous process. And like travel, digital modernization, digital transformation, often the trip to the clouds, start out with some type of a journey, some type of an adventure, some type of a requirement that comes down from the business. And more technology is wrapped directly in with fulfilling business requirements in ways that it's always been, but never at the pace that I think we're seeing it now. And so to manage that chaos, both to create new areas as well as to handle the transition of legacy systems into the cloud, to modernize those, to simplify those, I wanted to share with you 3 insights, 3 lessons learned, if you will, from traveling. I don't know if you can see it right now, but outside it is snowing, and I am in a hotel room because I am on travel right now. And I thought that was really kind of a fun analogy, because there are always things that happen that you can't plan for in advance. You never really know that they're going to happen, or if they, or the severity of what that's going to mean to the impact for you. All those throw schedule chaos into the process. But with good preparation, with good planning, with good principles around digital transformation, you may be able to weather those storms, quite literally in this case, much more easily. As we go into 2022, as we really kick off our philosophies, I wanted to really talk about 3 areas. The first area is about simplification. One of the things that we've all done is we've built in our studios, we've gotten very comfortable working remotely at home. And there's a lot of stuff around here, right? You've got your big second screen, you've got big monitors, you've got lots of comfortable things, you've got your favorite beverages just downstairs, and you get to eat what you make for yourself for lunch often, or have delivered to your house. That's a pretty fantastic experience, and frankly, for the most part, we've done pretty well, largely thanks to many of your efforts in your agencies. We've been able to extend work outside of the boundaries of just the office. Well, we're going to work remotely for a long, long time. I think study after study is starting to show people don't want to go back full-time to work. How do we solidify things in our enterprise so that they meet our employees and our partner contractors where they're at? And how do we extend that even further to our customers' experience so that they have that confidence and capability to take advantage of the services in a responsible and respectful way, and a really efficient way, both efficiently delivered and efficiently consumed. And I think we're at a really interesting pivot point here. So let me start off with topic number 1, idea from travel. So when I started traveling, I typically, pre-pandemic timelines, I would travel probably 40 to 45 weeks out of the year. I would hit 3 cities, like 2 to 3 cities every week, spend time with not only customers, but spend time with staff that was located in those cities. I love to travel. That for me is a lot of fun. But it is hard, it is difficult, and there are things that you have to think about in order to make that kind of travel happen. You're not going to check bags. You're going to go with just what's in your carry-on. You've got a carry-on and a backpack, and that's it, right? So, because if you want to be able to be nimble, be mobile, be flexible in how you move around, heavy, fixed, dragging a lot of stuff with you is pretty hard. So the key here is, and the insight is, simplify, simplify, simplify. Don't expect when you're traveling to have everything with you that you would in your home office. You've got to be able to break that down into much smaller, much more multi-purpose features and functions. And so simplify, simplify, simplify is important on so many different levels, because from a CIO's perspective or a CTO's perspective, if I'm taking all the things in my legacy data center just as they're built today, and I'm just moving them into an AWS or a Azure or a Google Cloud Platform or an IBM cloud, I'm really bringing a whole lot of assumptions. It's like bringing like every suitcase that I've ever seen with me on a trip. And that process is pretty difficult to do. And so how you bring that together, from an analogy perspective, how do you simplify that process? It's one thing to take everything and shed it after the fact. Sometimes that's what you have to do, that lift and shift motion. But often it makes more sense to say, let me simplify before I move something to the cloud, or as I move something into the cloud, so that I'm not dragging along all of those extra suitcases, all of that extra stuff while we're going on that journey. Just take the things that really matter with you, simplify them down so that you can really take advantage of the scalability and elasticity of the cloud and of containerization, right? So the containerization concept is kind of a nice analogy to a suitcase. Everything stays inside of it. It's accessible, you can get to it, but it stays inside of it. And your entire trip's capability, your experience's capability lives inside of that container. And you can have multiple containers for different kinds of trips or multiple things done, but only one at a time. That way you can carry it on the plane, you can get settled in quickly, you can move, you can be flexible, you can get to meetings, you can get to the airport, you can move around. You're portable, just like your container should be. Because while a container isn't terribly likely to bounce around quickly between different clouds, the concept and principle of having things containerized allows you to offer transferability to different solutions. So consistency, but transferability. So that kind of leads me to my second point and second insight. So like most of us, if we travel a lot, we have favorite providers. It's a natural thing to do. There's perks to doing it that way. You get familiar with it. They get to know you. Often there's better discounts and perks that come with having consistent providers. You have a fairly high confidence level that you're going to be supported as you go through your different stops. So for me, and this is just for me, but for me, I prefer American Airlines, Marriott hotels, and Uber as my primary move around transportation, get from place to place kind of environments. But that's not to say I can always take those three. Often I need to be able to be portable over and say, I'm better served by taking Delta or Southwest or name your other airline instead of American Airlines for this particular trip. So that process becomes pretty important. I have the ability to shift between areas, even if that shift happens on a day like today where it's snowing and I need to hop on a flight later. Charlotte might be blocked in. I might not be able to get through Charlotte. So I may have to switch airlines and transfer airlines in order to get back where I'm going. And so at the end of the day, that portability, that choice, that option, that simplification gives you the ability to have preferred providers, have preferred ways of doing things, but not getting so locked into them that you're unable to pivot and change or offer a different solution if somebody else is traveling with you. That's a lot like choosing platforming that is consistent across all of those environments. That expectation, that's a retirement of complexity by having consistency and predictability is really, really valuable. And for us, that's what the OpenShift platform really does. It gives you very consistent operating plane on which to operate in any cloud or on-prem. And so those are just things you might want to, as you start thinking about your roadmap, how do you retire risk? How do you have preferred vendors but have some flexibility to be able to adapt? And that really builds off of the number one in terms of simplify, simplify, simplify. Okay, number three, think about your preparation, because at the end of the day, it's how you prepare that really gives you a sense of speed. So this is really kind of at the root of, if you're a hardcore business traveler, this is how you think all the time. I have a very defined set of requirements and packing space. I have provision supplies that I occasionally have to refresh, but I have very consistent behaviors and habits that allow me to pack extremely quickly. Once you hit the point where you travel all the time, where you're portable, where you've simplified down, you get into this rhythm where you can really, really quickly put things together. You know what needs to go into that pack. You know what tools are going to enhance that. And you've done that because you do it the same way every time, and then you apply lessons learned to it. So that feedback loop, that process, is exactly at the same center of the principles for both Agile and DevOps philosophy. You need to do things consistently. There's a habit, there's time constraints, there's time boxing, there's automation wherever you can put that in play to do those things consistently over and over again. And constantly tweak and refine. Almost every trip I go on, there's something that I find that I want to change just a little bit in my preparation to deal with the risk. It might be that my toiletries, I'm short on some toiletries that I wish I would have had a few more of, or I really needed that delint thing, or a Tide stain stick, because inevitably I'm always spilling stuff on myself, especially on planes. And so those are things that you just kind of constantly, iteratively look at. If you're trying to be perfect right out of the gates, it's really, really hard. And in fact, it's impossible. Because your situation is always going to be unique and different than someone else's situation. So while you can manage risk by having really great SI partners and really great technology partners come in directly to help bring best practices and lessons learned, your environment is still your environment. It is unique from the 30 plus years of technology aggregation that you've built up and business process aggregation that you've built up. Not to mention whatever your culture is of your organization. All of those play a huge factor in digital transformation. And so if you can be consistent, but allow yourself the space to learn, to iterate, to grow, it becomes a very empowering thing. Because that allows you, as an executive sponsor of a program, to start to set expectations at your level, at the executive level, to give space to the teams that need to learn and operate. And I guarantee you, whether those teams are contracted teams, or they are government employee teams, or hybrid teams of the two, which is always a good idea, you're going to need time for that storming and norming to happen before they get into a routine perform stage. That is really some of the key lessons learned that I hope you take away from this short talk. I want to thank you all so much, but remember, simplify, simplify, simplify. Think in terms of prioritize your primary areas, but it's okay to be flexible. You know you're going to end up having to pivot and change. And think about your preparation. The more you standardize and automate your preparation for travel or for digital transformation projects, the better off you're going to be, because that's really the baseline that you get in order to get those feedback loops working so that you can be a learning organization. Again, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. Be safe, be well, and keep being awesome.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was excellent. Up next, we have our first panel discussion of the day, and our moderator for this discussion is Jory Heckman over at the Federal News Network. Jory, over to you.
Thanks, Kirsten. And just before we begin here, I want to encourage the audience to submit questions of their own in the Q&A section of Zoom. I think we all know where that lives at this point. And we will make sure that we get a point to go through those questions throughout the half-hour panel that's about to happen here. The panel, of course, being on the roadmap to digital transformation. So please send those questions in as we get started here. And just another bit of housekeeping, there will be 2 poll questions throughout the conversation here. Please be sure to fill those out and respond to those. That is essential to make sure that you guys get your CPE credits at the end here. And with that said, I would like to introduce our panelists. If you could please just give a wave when I give your name. We have Kevin Duvall, the Chief Technology Officer for the Administration for Children and Families within the Department of Health and Human Services. We have Sanjay Koyani, the Chief Technology Officer over at the Labor Department. Matt Dosberg, the Acting Associate Division Chief and Digital Transformation Lead for NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And Jonathan Album, the Federal CTO over at ServiceNow. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us this morning still. And there is a lot to get into here. I think a good way to better introduce yourself to the audience would just be to, give us a better understanding of what your agency is planning for its digital transformation journey in 2022. I mean, we're still setting New Year's resolutions in a lot of regards here. And I think that's a good place to get the conversation started. Kevin, let's hear from you first on that point.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Jory, and good morning, everyone. It's great to speak, and hopefully we'll, between the Q&A and us discussing, we'll all learn something from each other about digital transformation. For 2022, I actually, I've been reflecting on this quite a bit. Everything from what we're planning is all the way down to thinking about people's individual performance plans, and really for me, I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from the customer experience executive order that President Biden put together and released in December. For me, that's a really fundamental component of any sort of digital transformation journey, is solving the right problem and talking to your customers well in advance of it. Throughout some of the work I've done with the Administration for Children and Families over the past year, often technology doesn't necessarily yield a better answer. I'm a little bit biased too in being the CTO, and that, a lot of times it does. But you want to make sure you're solving the right problem for your program offices, for your mission spaces. Sometimes it can be searching for a problem that's not there. So really thinking about customer experience first, and then backing into how that allows us and encourages us to use either emerging tech or modernization to improve our mission.
All right, great. Thanks for that, Kevin. And Sanjay, we'll turn it on over to you. What's top of mind for you, and what's top of mind for the Labor Department in terms of digital transformation in this 2022?
Great, thanks, Jory. Good morning, everybody. Looking forward to this conversation. So I just completed my first year at DOL. I was at HHS for a number of years in a number of transformation roles over there, and chance to work with Kevin. It's good seeing you. We'll catch up after this. But it DOL, so coming in as CTO, there's three key areas of focus that I have. One, and I take a look at it from that view. One is overseeing our emerging tech and kind of our incubating and testing program, and really trying to understand how emerging tech can play a role in filling some of the gaps of how legacy systems can be enabled through things like automation to really empower digital transformation while we're waiting for legacy stuff to catch up to modernization. Second is a data modernization of our platforms. And so a lot of what we're trying to do with our business applications is make sure that we have a strong data layer underneath it. And so we're trying to make sure that also the data layer and our data architecture is in place so we can really take advantage of some of our data modernization efforts. And the third area is our enterprise architecture, which also falls under my purview. And the focus there really being how do we ensure that technology is aligned with mission, and that we're really looking at how we prioritize the applications we're focused on. So those are kind of the areas of focus. In 22, about a year ago, DOL shifted to a completely centralized IT environment. So all IT, its resourcing and budget came underneath the CIO's office. And that has helped, as well as created some challenges for how we prioritize our different IT systems. And so our goal is to continue to mature and as a centralized shared service environment, at the same time continuing to figure out how do we identify the best funding streams and the best prioritized approaches with each of our different agencies to get the different systems in place to modernize in a way that aligns with agency mission and the priorities of the agency first and foremost, and then link the IT systems up underneath it.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Sanjay. And Matt, we got a little bit of this already from Jill speaking earlier, Jill Marlowe, setting you up for to discuss a little bit more about the transformation roadmap that I think you're leading in a lot of respects. Let's hear more about what you think is on that roadmap and what some of the top goals are here for the year ahead.
Yep. Hi, everybody, and good morning. And just a quick thanks to ATARC for this opportunity. I joined Goddard October 2020, and really my role there is to drive it forward on a digital transformation journey, but also advocating and representing at the agency level. And I think that to understand kind of where we're going this next year, I want to talk quickly about one of the challenges that we have. NASA is a decentralized organization. You can see that with my role at my center level, but then engaging at the agency level. And this is reinforced by a decentralized culture. Missions want to retain authority and control since failure is not an option. An 80% enterprise solution will not work. And this is a huge challenge with an enterprise DT strategy. One of the approaches is building partnerships and coalitions across the agency. Jill and Ron have done a great job of bringing folks together to build these coalitions and finding opportunities for enterprise solutions. So the roadmap for 2022 is really focusing in on these coalitions and coalition projects, enterprise solutions. I'm on one of them called Smart Review, where we're looking at program project status reviews and really trying to digitize, automate, and make that as easy as possible for the decision makers to get to the data they need at the right time to make the right decision. So we're starting to organize around that. When you start looking at the scale, when you look across the agency of programs and projects, it becomes pretty complex. So trying to find an enterprise approach and solution there. Data is going to be a big priority. Data strategy, Ron's on. I'm sure Ron will speak about that. There's some other coalition projects or enterprise solutions we're looking at. Smart Center. Digital engineering is a big one. I mean, that is especially a big priority and is important for Goddard just to handle the complexity of future flagship missions. So, I think the overall approach is building these partnerships and coalitions to partner on these enterprise solutions and try to build, a more enterprise culture and approach. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And Jonathan, I think you have a great perspective on this as well. Zooming out here a little bit, what do you see as some of the big, broad themes that we're going to see play out in 2022 when it comes to digital transformation in the federal space?
Well, thanks, Jory. And I really appreciate being here today and the comments from the panelists so far. There are a few themes that emerge in the conversations I have in my role at ServiceNow. Before ServiceNow, I worked in the federal government for a number of years and CIO in different agencies, including Department of Agriculture. So as I hear these conversations, I think both about my experience as a CIO, but I also think about what I'm hearing from across different agencies I interact with. And some of the themes that emerge are around the idea of resilient missions and being able to continue under any circumstances. We obviously saw that over COVID, and we made a lot of changes very quickly. And I continue to hear that we want to make sure that these changes we made are stabilized and we can continue to operate under any kinds of circumstances. A focus on the future of work and using technology to continue to make work simpler and more effective for employees. And then lastly, something I call digital acceleration. We're talking about transformation, but we've been talking about digital transformation for a long time, and we've all made a lot of investments in IT modernization and digital transformation kinds of technologies. And when I say digital acceleration, it's getting these investments to really provide demonstrable value for the mission. And I have a lot of conversations at different ServiceNow customers and colleagues still in the federal government around those topics all the time.
Great. Well, Jonathan, thanks for kind of setting the stage for the rest of the conversation. Kevin, I actually want to circle back to a point you made regarding customer experience, and that actually touches on an audience question we have here. How are agencies analyzing their needs and meeting that executive order on customer experience, I think that is a huge driver of improving that CX experience, is the digital journey and what agencies can provide for their customers in that space. So, where do you see the value of these two things intersecting CX and digital transformation?
Yeah, great question. So that executive order called out specific kind of high impact service centers. HHS's is Medicare and Medicaid, kind of the 1-800 Medicare experience. So not something specifically called out for ACF, but the thing I'll say about kind of how we're thinking about it at ACF is interesting organization, ACF. So it actually has a role, a woman named Emily Mella, who she is the Chief Experience Officer of ACF. So I have kind of a partner that I can work with in kind of thinking through these problems. So it's not, in some organizations, the technologist has to kind of think through experience and innovation and XYZ, kind of the whole gambit. But there's actually a partner that I have that she is absolutely fantastic to work with, and really we're trying to figure out where are there areas that kind of have willing participants to driving modernization. So ACF, while 1,400 federal staff, give or take, kind of small in the FTE footprint, has a huge mission space. Lots of predominantly through grant relationships. And so how I think about that one is, we provide a lot of the wholesale kind of experience to serving children and families. We serve those people through grantees and contracts and supporting, state block grants and things like that. So we actually have a pretty hard job of thinking about the whole system and what are the levers that we can influence to improve customer experience for those end consumers, whether it's a mother applying for a certain benefit for a child or something like that. But working in partnership with that person, as well as others in our program offices, allows us to kind of move forward in interesting ways, and engaging with I think the other panelists will hit on this, but engaging with willing program offices. You have to have, you can't always kind of have transformation happen upon someone. You have to have those folks that are like, yeah, I think, this part of my mission could change, or we're thinking about it, but could it be designed or delivered better? Having those folks and working with them is how you kind of build some quick wins in this kind of transformation portfolio.
Yeah. Well, seems like there's a great team working on this effort here, and really, really both of those disciplines, the technology side of things and the CX side of things, working together. That's great to hear. Sanjay, in terms of how that's going over at DOL, how do you see those two disciplines working together, the digital modernization side of things and the CX side of things?
I mean, similar to I think what Kevin's talking about, the key area of focus for DOL is to make sure that as we're looking at modernizing the applications, we have a number of sub-agencies that we provide support to, and we always look first and foremost at what are their mission needs, and then how does IT be an enabler for that? As we kind of shifted to a shared services environment, and we then became the provider of IT, what's become really important is, and I think it's a really smart idea from our CIO. So every month we meet with each of the different agency components and look at their mission roadmap, and then how IT aligns with it, so that as we culturally look at what are we trying to do and how are we trying to improve the customer experience for both the agency that needs to use these business applications as well as our end users, we continually on a monthly basis look at and prioritize where, since we only have so much money, what are the priorities? What are we trying to improve and lead with need around? So based on those most important mission areas, how do we then continually reshift what we're focusing on from a modernization standpoint? And then of course, a key driver for all that is what customer experience areas are we trying to improve? So that becomes another driver for that. And I think that what's really turned out to be successful is having those engagements every month to do that in partnership with the mission areas. And then, Jonathan talked about resiliency, being really resilient around what are the priorities? Are they still the same this year? And where do we need to shift our resources to make sure that we're really meeting the most important areas? So that engagement with our customers becomes really key to ensure that there's not one area or the other leading this, but it's done jointly and it's done on a frequent basis.
All right, great. Thanks for that. And Matt, I imagine NASA has a different benchmark for who they define their customers are. But, I think circling back to your earlier point about this being such a federated, decentralized environment for NASA, let's maybe unpack the CX question from that perspective. How do you, what do you see as NASA's ultimate customers in all of this, and how can NASA Goddard and NASA writ large perhaps move the needle in CX in a way that is important for this digital transformation journey?
Yep, and to Sanjay's point, I think it's like staying close with our mission partners, and the mission partners could be both internal, external to NASA, but really aligning to their priorities and their goals and understanding what their targeted outcomes are. And there's a way to do that. Use user research, human-centered design as you're iterating out solutions, but really staying close and understanding like what they're trying to accomplish is kind of key. And using DT modernization to enable those outcomes and goals. NASA is definitely, there's a lot of different stakeholders, and you want to make sure you're inclusive across all of those stakeholders. To build the support and the buy-in that you need. Just a quick note, so before NASA, I was at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, where I ran a program, Digital Innovation Development, where we had a pretty successful transformation of the U.S. asylum program. And, we use human-centered design, user research. Our stakeholders and end users were a little bit different. Asylum officers and other folks within the agency, but those practices are proven, and we were successful because we were listening to the user and using an iterative approach. So using those same kind of techniques at NASA, just a different stakeholder community, but just to make sure everybody's represented and their voice is heard. That's my approach.
All right, great. Yeah, obviously a great use case of making this transformation have an impact from a customer experience perspective. Jonathan, of course, you've got a great background from agencies that made customer experience a priority before it was cool, I guess. But this is something that has a long tail to it. This is not the first executive order that we've seen that has put a premium on improving customer experience.
Sure.
This is something that goes back decades. I think like 30 years is the scale of what we're talking about here. What ultimately can agencies do now to move the needle in a way that perhaps was not possible, in previous iterations of administrations making this a priority through previous executive orders?
So, even, beyond the executive order, look at the president's management agenda that has as one of its pillars customer service, and the EO really fleshes out some of the opportunities there. And, Jory, to answer your question, I think the technology has changed in a way that makes so much of the interconnections between agencies and the data between agencies that represent the same person so often. We can do that more readily today. If you think about what's in the EO and this idea of life events, and there are times when you really need the government and the government needs to be there for you, it should be very simple to access the services that you need. And if someone's experiencing poverty, say, they might need unemployment insurance, and we have the Department of Labor. They might need a welfare benefit that might come from ACF. I worked at the USDA and worked on the food stamp program, SNAP, and other nutrition programs over time, separate programs. They're all managed by different state agencies, but they're federal programs. So, you have limitations in the roles that I had or others in the panel had, in terms of how you can influence how the states work, but you can paint a vision for how these programs can work together and how agencies that aren't under the same department and don't have the same mission per se, but they are used at the same time by that same person, how we can present ourselves out in a more unified, seamless way to make it easy for someone in need to get the benefits that they're entitled to. And I think sometimes you have to paint those big visions, which takes some imagining how to do it, but we know it's possible. And we know that if we take an outside-in approach to government, and we think about the people that use government and what they're experiencing when they need government, the last thing they need is to learn the bureaucracy of several federal agencies and state agencies, maybe some local government agencies, in order to get what they need. Well, how do we think about that a little bit differently and make it simple to get those benefits? And on the back end, all those systems of record, that underlying data, that can remain as long as we have platforms and technologies that can sit across these to make a unified, simplified customer experience possible. And those technologies exist, and we all have access to them now. The companies that we interact with in our private lives utilize these kinds of technologies. So it's possible. It's a matter of, do we want to do it as a government or a collection of government agencies? And the EO really calls out this opportunity. And I'm very interested to see how agencies and groups of agencies choose to approach it.
All right, very good. I'm excited to see how agencies tackle this as well. But I think this is a good point to get to our first poll question of the panel. Alyssa, if we can get that ready. All right, how important is emerging technology to federal digital transformation? We'll give everyone a second to fill that out. And it looks like an overwhelming majority, 72% of you, said it's very important, followed by 28% saying important. So that is it's encouraging to see. I'm glad no one answered in the negative here, but I think that's a good takeaway from how folks are feeling about all of this. To maybe circle back on another point here, I think data is something that resonates with all of you, and as far as this digital transformation journey. And of course, we'll hear from Ron Thompson, the CDO over at NASA, in a little bit. And so I don't want to step on his toes all too much here, but Matt, maybe just to set him up and tee off what he'll be saying in a little bit here, how is data transformation an essential part of this digital transformation that we are talking about here and now?
Yeah, definitely. So the project I'm on, Smart Review, which is essentially like an executive dashboard. I mean, that's all going to be driven by data. And right now, all that data is siloed, and getting to that authoritative source, bringing that data together, and does that necessarily mean bring it all into one central place? I mean, maybe not. But I think getting access to that data for the decision makers to have in near real time as they're looking at a mission program or project, I mean, that's critical, and we're going to be focused on that. So that's a particular use case. I think when you look at digital engineering, being able to share data and models, I mean, that's critical to making progress in digital engineering. AI ML, NASA's going in big on, and it has been doing AI ML, but you need the data there to do your machine learning. And so all of the, it's foundational to all of those different use cases. And, that's why it's going to be a top priority over this next year. And I'm sure Ron will go in more detail, but yeah, I mean, data is a huge priority.
Excellent. And Kevin, I realize you previously wore a CDO hat within HHS. And so I imagine data still carries a lot of relevancy and a lot of value for your current mission over at ACF. How ultimately does that data transformation move the needle and impact this digital transformation that we're all talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in kind of two ways, and one's kind of a cautionary tale and one's kind of a forward-looking tale. So I'll start with a forward-looking one. There was one program that I worked with within ACF that just unlocking a basic data visualization tool on top of like their existing program infrastructure was a complete paradigm shift, right? Like, they had an application that wrote to a database, right? Most applications work like that. But to unlock and really see insights just drove a complete change in how they behaved and operated. And it's stuff like that that, you know, asking people, how are you making these decisions? Do you have data to help you make these decisions? And if the answer is no, you know, what can I do to help you? What can we do to help you? It changed how they measured performance, how they looked at things. It was a really, you know, it was a success story. The caution I would say is, in some of these emerging technologies and kind of tools for digital transformation, the data piece is the thing I always worry about, right? So whether it's, you know, you getting locked into a given, you know, type of data structure, or you having trouble getting the data out, or getting, you know, the data with the insights out, those are all challenges that agencies should, you know, seriously consider. That's not a tale to say, you know, don't use modern technology at all, but, you know, just have in the back of your mind, like, you know, okay, I'm putting all this data in there, like at some point there might be an opportunity where I'm going to be taking it out. And so let's do the hard work right now to think about that future. So it's not a scramble at the end.
Got it. So what I'm picking up from that is a little bit of culture change, you know, how something like a basic data visualization tool can really shift how people see the mission. And Sanjay, you know, I imagine labor has a huge part of this conversation, a big producer of data, and being able to ultimately, I guess, leverage that data in a way that is actionable and usable is going to be huge. Tell us a little bit more about how you see data influencing this digital transformation mission.
Yeah, so data is a key pillar of our digital transformation roadmap. I think the reason why you have so many executives, you know, whether federal or private, that are pushing for ensuring that you have access to your data is that and moving away from legacy systems, is that for you to really take advantage of where the world's headed with big data and emerging technologies, whether it's AI, ML, big data, cloud, you need to have your technologies modernized. So we've got kind of a multi-pronged approach to how we're looking at that. But at DOL, we collect incredible amounts of information. So sometimes we say we're data rich, but information poor, in that we collect a lot of it, linking this stuff together and making sure that we're creating greater insights out of the incredible amounts of data we collect, like enforcement data and how we're dealing with violations, or looking for where we should be taking appropriate actions needs to happen. So as we start to modernize our applications, we're also modernizing the data platforms and how we collect data and how we're looking at integrating that in addition to each of these applications. One, just to start getting folks to get better dashboarding and automating the approaches to data, but then the larger play is how do we start to integrate and link these this different data information across the agency so we can create greater value. And as you know, Jonathan talked about, looking across services, not only within your program, but outside of these different federal agencies, which is really the best play we can make. That's the ultimate goal. But right now we're trying to do the crawl, walk, run. How do we get good dashboarding on what we have in place? How do we modernize our approaches and our systems for how we do that? And then how do we start moving towards greater data integration so we can have stronger insights to what we're doing? At DOL, we've been blessed with 2 different TMF allotments of funds through the Technology Modernization Fund. And that's also played a key role in us being able to accelerate areas of data management and analytics that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So it's a really important thing that's part of our digital roadmap.
All right, great. And Jonathan, speaking about being data rich and information poor, I think an agency that has been rich in both information and data is USDA, your former agency. I think they have several hundred dashboards at this point that have really tracked a lot of key performance indicators over there, and I think that's a testament to what can be done with data in terms of improving the mission. But to set a more general question for you, what ultimately can agencies do across the board to make themselves not just data rich but information rich?
So I think part of that is really understanding how the data flows through the environment. We can track dashboards, and we can know what the data is, but you really have to understand how it's used and where does it come from, what uses does it have, and how it flows is really a representation of what the work in your environment is. And when we're digitizing our work, we're trying to make it simpler for people to interact with our agencies. From a CX perspective, we want to create self-service opportunities, and we want to use AI and ML to simplify decision-making. But it really comes down to what is the data, how does it flow? And the way the data flows today, is that how you want it to continue to work for perpetuity, or is that just how it's evolved and it doesn't necessarily make sense for a digital government and for digital services? So I think it's really incumbent to sometimes take a strategic pause and understand these processes, and then rethink and redesign them for how you want them to work. So data is great, but how do you use it and how does it flow? I think that's really critical to make it so the data becomes actionable and we can take real meaningful actions with it.
All good points there. Thanks, Jonathan. And I think it's time for the second and final poll question of the panel. So Alyssa, if we could get that ready for everyone. How far along would you say your agency is within their digital transformation journey? All right. And we are working on it. Seems to be the top response here at 64%. And a little mixed on some of the other responses here, but that makes sense based on what we're hearing right here and now. But I think, unfortunately, we're drawing close to time here, so I'll open it up to the lightning round here and give everyone approximately 30 seconds to a minute to leave us with some final sentiments here. Kevin, why don't you kick us off here in terms of those closing remarks here? What should be the key takeaway for folks as we wrap up this conversation?
I think Jonathan hit on a really good point towards the end of his comment, which is intentionality. Be intentional and be customer driven. If you do those two things, the right things will follow.
All right, very good. And Sanjay, we'll toss it on over to you. What's the closing sentiment here that you want to leave with everyone?
Yeah, I just say that outside of what's already been discussed, I think leadership has always been key. That as government things shift all the time with different administrations, different priorities, making sure that leadership on both the mission side and the IT side are linked. And so that people really understand that how IT can enable that and how we need to be flexible, but certainly prioritize so that not every new thing that comes up suddenly gets the focus, but how do we stay disciplined around what are the priorities? What is the core thing we're trying to do in 22? Again, be resilient and shifting as needed, but how do you stay focused on that? How do you make sure there's a good story in place? And it's not just a human-centered design story, but the agency's mission enablement story. And that really being the driver and the motivator for what are the core things at the department that need to really drive forward? How do you lead with need? And how do you make sure that both the mission and the IT are being prioritized, including the funding sources for how you get that in place? So leadership continues to be a real core factor in making sure that this stuff happens.
All right, great. And Matt, we'll hear from some other great NASA folks throughout the summit here, but what would you like to leave as your closing thoughts here in terms of where this conversation goes from here?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here alongside Jill and Ron to share NASA's transformation journey. NASA is such an incredible place, the people, the missions, all the discovery being done for the benefit of humanity. I really encourage everyone to learn more about NASA's journey and the challenges we're facing, and then invite you guys to come and help us drive DT forward. So, but I thank you for your time. Thanks.
Sure thing. Thank you for your time. And Jonathan, I think you get the final word on this.
Yeah.
What should people take away from this conversation?
Yeah, Jory, this is a great panel, a lot of great ideas. And, we talked about a lot of different projects we want to take on. In my career, inside and outside of the government, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of projects fail and not produce the outcome, because too often we get caught up in the technology. We buy the new thing, but we don't know how we're going to demonstrate value to the people that we're serving, whether inside our agency or people in Congress or other overseers our agencies might have. So I would leave everybody with this idea of always be thinking about how you demonstrate value of these technology investments we want to make. It means know what your baselines are, figure out how you're going to measure improvements and what are the most important things that you're trying to improve. And then do that project, do those measurements, and be able to tell a story. And when you can tell a great story around transformation and improvements, you're going to get more resources to continue to do more projects. So I think it comes down to that in the end.
All right, great. Well, I think that's a great closing note here. That's unfortunately all the time we have here today, but please give everyone on the panel a virtual round of applause for all their great participation. And Kirsten, I think we're gonna toss it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jory and panelists. Up next, we have another emerging technology talk, this time from Hansing Bay. Hansing is the public sector chief technologist over at Zscaler. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be checking in from. Let me go ahead and share my screen here so you can. So, in getting ready for this talk, I said to myself, everybody understands security. Everybody gets it. But what is it about security that makes people kind of cringe a little bit? And one of it, I believe, is that it's always kind of seems to get in your way, right? You might have seen this when you had a Teams call or WebEx or Zoom, and your antivirus goes full scanning just because of someone made a mistake. And instead of doing at off hours, it's scanning, doing 100% full scan, and your system crawls, right? Everything becomes jittery, voices get lost, etc. So I titled this "Security That Doesn't Impede Your Productivity." But I'll also say that throughout this session, think about these questions. Where are your users and where is your data? And I believe Sanjay hit on this topic just a few minutes ago. So think about that. Okay, where are your users and where's your data? So with that, let's get back to basics a little bit. So digital transformation talked, and I said transformation, everybody knows what that word means. We can intuit it. But I went to the dictionary and I said, what is the official definition for transformation? And it says thorough dramatic change in form or appearance. Okay, nothing spectacular there, got it. But then I'm always interested in etymology. One of my dreams is to be on Jeopardy one day. So every one of these factoids I have to try and remember. And the etymology for this was interesting because trans means to go beyond. And immediately I said, oh, transcontinental, that makes perfect sense, to go beyond. And the form is to make, build, construct, or devise. Again, not too surprising there. We know what form means. So why do I bring this up? Because transformation in security is slightly different than in other aspects of IT or technology in general. So let's take a step back. Not too long ago, this is not too long ago, where the network and applications were well-defined. You were on a predictable path. You couldn't get off that path. Everything was guarded, had guardrails. It was in a walled garden. You couldn't really go in or out. And in fact, there was really nothing to go out to other than your corporate network. And the traffic was funneled because the network is built not so much for the users and the application. Network is built to service the masses in the best possible way possible, given the budget. And I remember a conversation I had. I worked for a Fortune 10 financial company in my prior life, and had this conversation where the head of the business called me and said, Hansan, you network guys, why are you so slow? Why do you drag your feet? Help me get this stuff out. This role, I'm agile. I have 800 servers that I need to take care of. Why are you guys so slow? And I said, Bill, I said, in North America, I have two backbones. internationally for a 350,000 person company, I have 2 international backbones. That's 4 total. I can't afford to be agile and bleeding edge because I'm a necessity, right? And he said, okay, I get that. And I said, Bill, networking is like breathing. Nobody cares until it stops. And then all hell breaks loose. So slow and steady was always the way to mantra in terms of networking. Then just 3 years ago, everything blew up. You know, everybody understands this. Everybody went everywhere doing whatever they could in different forms, different locations, different equipment. And out of necessity, we had to manage this onslaught. And it actually was the forcing function. To be honest, it was the forcing function that IT, security, and networking needed to bring that transformational to go beyond, let's go back to our definition, right? To go beyond what was the norm. So let me put it in a different context. So analog version on the left, digital version on the right. Okay, we all played this, right? Whack-a-mole. And I would say, yeah, it was fun. You won tickets, you can win things. And it's, like I said in the deck here, you see in the deck here, it's winnable. This is completely doable. But what if overnight, the snap of your finger, the entire landscape changed? Now, what are you going to do? It wasn't the whack-a-mole with a couple of holes and 1 or 2 moles. Now this happened. Well, you have a couple different choices. You could go buy hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of appliances and ship it out there. I'm not sure where you're going to get the manpower to hook this up at all these remote locations. So that is a technique, as we say, and may or may not work out. Or you might say, you know what, this is operationally impossible, a pipe dream. Let's just funnel all the traffic to a choke point and buy these giant appliances, upgrade it, make them faster, speeds and feeds, right? Speeds and feeds matter. And this could be a technique as well. But if this was your approach to the changing landscapes of security, then essentially you're screwed, okay? Because it won't work. And I have empirical evidence that it doesn't work. So think about all the spectacular outages and data leakages and companies being owned and everything being encrypted, et cetera, malware attacks that happen. Do we really think that in these companies, every vertical, healthcare, government, energy, DOD even, there was a big breach in Australia, and financials as well, of course. Do we really think that these companies didn't have a firewall? Do we really think that they didn't have malware, antivirus running on every laptop? So empirically, it's not enough. What we were doing wasn't enough to change, to face the new onslaught of attacks and different ways of attacking. So I thought about this and I said, well, what would Carl Speckler do in this case? So who is Carl Speckler? Carl Speckler is a renowned security expert in this field, field being the key word. So those of you who may not know, Carl Speckler was Bill Murray's character in Caddyshack. So if you haven't seen Caddyshack, I highly recommend watching. It's one of the iconic things from the past, oldie but goodie, as they say. And Carl was faced with a gopher running and ruining his golf course. Okay, maybe it's a malware problem that he would give me a break. Okay, that's the best I could do. Malware, good enough. And he was faced with this infestation, and he decided to do something about it. Okay, so what did he do? Well, he saw the enemy and he came up with a plan. And his plan essentially was to blow up literally everything. Okay, every hole, every warren, he explosives everywhere and took care of the problem. So again, that is a technique. You could do that. But let's go back to our definition. Dramatic change. That's the key word that caught my attention. Dramatic, okay, to go beyond. And what I'm talking about are tectonic forces, not just tweaking this or that. When we have an explosion of network capacity, data is no longer gigabytes or terabytes, it's beyond exabytes now. And that's just mind-boggling number of amount of data that we're dealing with. Okay, it's orders of magnitude increase every year. I would say even it's faster than Moore's law that we're all aware of, the amount of data that we're producing. So think about the forces that's required to bend a railroad track like this. Okay, and there's another forcing function, and it's social media, good or bad, like it or hate it. I call social media the class action lawsuit of one person. One person with a couple hundred characters basically has a megaphone to reach the entire world. Okay? Think about that. We've never had to deal with this in the past. Okay, again, we all had a walled garden, everything was protected, and now we're interacting like crazy. And on top of that, we have this. So in IT and in security in particular, and networks too, you either keep pace or perish. Those are your two options. Okay, you can keep pace or you can perish. And my old boss used to joke, you or your replacement will get the job done, right? So it's important that we keep pace so that we don't have to perish. The other thing, the forcing function, is that, the barbarians at the gate. And I like barbarians at the gate because it focuses the company. And it doesn't have to be malware. It could be your competitor. It could be someone else. It could be friendly competition. It energizes us. It focuses us. And so barbarians at the gate are a good thing. I would actually say it's a good thing because it gives you a sense of mission, purpose, and direction, and good lay of the land. But again, it's not barbarians at the gate. They breached it long ago. One of the biggest way malware gets infected now is Google Forms, right? People use surveys and whatnot. And guess what? They can inject malware in there. A document that's not even on your GFE, on your equipment, on your laptop, sitting in OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox or Box, whatever it may be, could be waiting there with malware waiting to strike. So we had a way of doing these things in a legacy way. Okay, traffic had to go through security. There was a piece of iron that was guaranteed, quote unquote, to protect you, but the traffic had to be funneled there. So that created a suboptimal path because, again, the network wasn't built to where your user and your applications are anymore. Okay, my guess is you have SaaS, you have cloud OneDrives and Google Drives of the world. So it's suboptimal, which then automatically causes a choke point because you're trying to funnel all that traffic. So it causes, not only is it suboptimal route, but it's also creating a checkpoint. So what's the transformational part of this? What if we had security that could follow the user? Think about that. Users don't have to go to security appliances anymore. The security comes to the user, and that means you don't lose productivity. Okay, again, security that doesn't impede productivity because the security follows the user and the workload. And I asked the very first slide, where are your users and where is your data? Okay, so with that, the other thing to keep in mind is the white glove service. Okay, what do I mean by white glove service? Not every activity requires the same level of scrutiny. Somebody browsing YouTube doesn't require the same level of scrutiny as someone working with your document that has your intellectual property. Okay, so different levels of scrutiny and security, different guardrail for different work. Again, it's situational aware security is what we're talking about. And of course, location independent. I don't care where you are. You could be sitting in Starbucks. You could be sitting in Dunkin' Donuts. You can be sitting in a restaurant, at home, hotel, motel. Doesn't matter. Wherever you are, the security comes to you. And talking about this choke point and suboptimal network, so I'll clue you into a dirty little secret as an old-time network guy. Networks are complicated, but they were always built for the networks. It was not built to accommodate the user because it's not practical. Okay, I would love it if every highway came to my driveway. Okay, think about that. If you pulled out of your driveway and you can get on the freeway and get to you where you need to go, wouldn't that be awesome? Of course, it's not possible. Okay, it's not tenable. So when you think about transformation in terms of security, answer these questions. Where are your users? Where's your data? And finally, what the hell are you going to do about that to protect it? Okay. So with that, thank you for your time, and thanks to the good folks at ATARC for giving me an opportunity to talk this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Up next, we have our second panel of the day, which I will be moderating. And as another reminder, please send in your audience questions in the Q&A section of this platform, as well as answer the poll questions that come up throughout the discussion in order to ensure that you will receive your CPE credits. And now I would like if our two panelists could please come on camera. And I'll have you both introduce yourself real quick. We'll start with you, Shireen.
Hey, good morning, Kristen, Gulam, and everybody. Wish you all Happy New Year. I am Charian Swangan. I'm Chief Architect at National Science Foundation. I manage the Enterprise Architecture Program for the agency and also lead the technology innovation initiatives. I'm glad to join today's panel and share our digital transformation efforts, and I'm looking forward to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. And then over to you, Gulam.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Gulam Shakir. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for National Archives and Records Administration. I've been in the CTO role for about almost 1.5 years. I am dealing with very exciting challenges where we have to deal with legacy application modernizing, but at the same time, taking a step into interesting technologies like RPA and AI/ML, and what Hansang this thing touched on, like security, zero trust, those kind of things. So good.
Great. Thank you. Shireen, starting with you, let's hear about the evolution and bring us up to speed on the change surrounding applications in the government, specifically at your agency.
Sure. Actually, it's a great question to start the panel. This is just my perception, though. The federal government is in the midst of apps economy and productization. Let me tell you what this means. First, let me thank a few of what has happened in the past that brought us to this point. I think first to thank was like investment in cloud, the technology, TMF, technology management funds, right? Push towards shared services, increased focus on customer experience. I think the recent executive order is an accelerator to this. Government-wide data strategy and more. So a lot of these are great enablers why we are in this world of apps economy and productization. Now let's have a retrospective. What started this at the first place? Why this revolution started? What was the tipping point? I think the healthcare.gov implementation a few years ago was a big lessons learned for the entire government. We learned a lot from that effort, and then we kind of initiated so many of these transformation activities that has transformed the government and got to this point where we are today. So let's see what we are doing at the National Science Foundation. So at the National Science Foundation, when there's an opportunity for us to develop a new capability or modernize a service, our first option is to always look for if there is any shared services we could take advantage of, readily available that we can plug in and we can use it. The second option, if there is no shared services, the second option is if there is a SaaS capability that we could just take and plug and play in our infrastructure. If these two are not the choices, then what we are doing recently is we are shifting our focus to low-code, no-code platforms where we can quickly take a platform, configure to the capability and provide the service. And our last option is, if none of these work, the last option is to develop a cloud-native application in the infrastructure as a service model. Now, even within this model, our architecture is all about microservices. And this provides opportunities to plug in third-party services into our architecture. So this is the new way how we look at developing applications at the foundation. Now, why are we doing this? I think the primary reason, as I said before, is to increase customer experience. We want to really reduce the burden on our customers and really have them focused on accomplishing the mission of the agency rather than trying to find the place where they have to go and get something. So we want to really focus on ease of use, get access to this application through various mechanisms, including mobile devices. Standardization, because we want to always make sure, okay, this part of the functionality is always available on this corner of the screen. We want to make sure these standards are pushed to our customers and make their life a lot easier. Then, we talked about these modernization initiatives. What we do is we practice agile methodologies where the first focus would be we develop a minimum viable product and make it available to the customers. Now, we know going to this implementation, it's not going to meet everybody's desire on day one. We are going to have a lot of feedback coming in. So really, to take advantage of this, we want to build rapid feedback loops with our customers. So these information funnel through back our communication channels, we factor in, and we have an agile mechanism to deliver the change with speed. So this is the new world we are living in. And again, thanks to a lot of these enablers that has happened in the past, how we got to this point. So we are living in the world of apps economy and productization. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Shiri. And Gulam, I'm going to pose the same question to you as well. If you could please walk us through the evolution at NARA around applications in the government.
Sure. Happy to address that. I think as Shiri, hit on some of the points there. So at the end of the day, back, a few years ago, the only way to do an agency mission is to build the whole, the system yourself, right? So you invest on the infrastructure, you hire the people, but what happens at the time is you kind of are making such a big investment in your infrastructure and your people. Suddenly the focus is gone from the users, the feedback, how you're going to channel the user feedback and iterate faster and faster. Now I think we are at a point where we have learned a lesson that we just have to focus on our mission directly. We should not be reinventing the wheel, trying to, for example, build a data center, for example. I think nobody would even go to the point where they have to build a data center right now, because they're just going to say, I'm just going to use what technologies are readily available and just go with that. I think that was the first inflection point with the cloud first policy, where people said, I don't want to build my own infrastructure. I just want to use this infrastructure. That was the first thing. And then there came a second inflection point where, okay, now you have a readily available infrastructure in the cloud. Now I can bring up all sort of infrastructures now, but you still haven't solved the part about, how do I maintain it and keep it up to date? How do I adapt myself so that I can iterate faster, so that I can deliver the best customer service? Then came about the pivot to the platform as a service and managed services. So basically you're saying, give me a solution where, for example, in a database, I want to store my data, access it, and these are my requirements. And there you have it. Basically, you're offloading all that infrastructure, the management, to a third party where you basically are left to just focus on the mission. And I think we are steadily going on that curve right now, where people don't even want to bring up infrastructure on the cloud. They just want to say, give me a serverless abstraction. I just want to bring my user's requirement, right? The business flow in whatever language I want. And there is no restriction in terms of where your knowledge, in terms of, in what technology, because everything can be run in the cloud. And then you just bring that requirements and then you just transform into a code, and then it just runs by itself, right? So I think we are slowly going there, and I think that is also like the right way to do it, because there is so much explosion of the data, and then you basically have the capability to respond to like, a single user and just scale to like, millions of users in a matter of, minutes and hours. So I think we are steadily going towards that curve, and I think we are we are on the same path. We started investing in the cloud. We are maturing faster by using the platform, looking at serverless, looking at managed services, and as Shireen pointed out, low code, so that we can focus on the mission, focus on how we can bring in the best experience for our users. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for walking us through that as well. And Shireen, I want to ask, how has adapting to the new normal brought on by the pandemic inspired digital transformation? And if you could include, ideas around new ways of working or new customer behaviors, business reorganization, anything you want to share with us?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, we are in this new and strange world. So I like to start by saying sometimes we are forced to embrace change with a turnkey format when there are no choices, right? So 2 years ago, when this hit us, we didn't have a choice. We have to, just one fine day, we all went remote. And actually, we have really identified certain gaps in this remote world, and we have kind of narrowed it down. And I think the remote world is close to the perfection in my mind, at least where NSF is today. However, as we exit from the pandemic and move to the new normal, we don't expect things to return as it was before the pandemic. I personally know a few of my colleagues who are desperate to go back to in-person work, and a few of my other colleagues who would like to stay remote permanently. So this is going to be the new world, and the desires are diversifying, right? So at the foundation, what we are doing is we're exploring the third way called hybrid work. But it's going to be a very challenging transformation. To operationalize this, we have to look at this from multiple aspects: policy, process, HR, culture, right? But one thing that can facilitate this big, huge transformation is technology. And technology is an enabler and a catalyst to any such, broader transformation. So at the agency, what we are thinking is to make it work. This hybrid work is going to be, we need to invest in immersive technologies. Now, when I say immersive technologies, this is like to facilitate hybrid meetings, how we can bring the people in this hybrid world who are going to stay permanently remote and distributed, and people who are on the headquarters, how they can have the same kind of collaboration experience that was happening a few years before when we were before the pandemic, right? So this is where the immersive technologies could be a humongous game changer. I think the commercial world has really pioneered some of these platforms. We just need to really look at how this could be adopted for the government. The next thing is, now in the distributed world or the hybrid world, we are going to have trust issues and how the leadership is going to trust the workforce, how we are going to quantify certain work is happening at the speed and objectives are getting met at the agency mission level. So we need to make sure the data, to facilitate this, we need to make sure the data-driven culture is ingested in our processes, where we develop a lot of data tools that justifies the leadership, how the work is happening, how the workforce is getting satisfied, those kind of things. So data-driven culture is going to be a humongous game changer on this as well. And finally, advanced cybersecurity capabilities. I think the previous presentation kind of highlighted this. So in the distributed world, the security is going to follow the user and the data. So how are we going to make sure things are secure? And I think the zero trust framework is a game changer there. And also, we need to provide cutting edge user experience, end user capabilities. I've seen in one of the Gartner research, they're talking about providing VR tools to the customers. So this is like the future, distant future, and it's not far away. So the commercial world has embraced it. I think it's the government time to really embrace and think how we can get there and be part of this new world, new future. So that's where we are, and we are putting a lot of our research into this. So I'm looking forward to this game changer.
Excellent. And Ghulam, have you seen significant changes for digital transformation at your agency, for better or worse, brought on by COVID-19?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is mostly, I would say it's for the better, because what it has done is, even though, like, if you look at the previous question, we are that evolution of moving from an infrastructure to a platform to a managed service to low code, it took a long time, like probably like 15 years, I would say, probably more than that. But right now we are just being asked to transform in a matter of few months and years. I think it has really accelerated the pace of that. People want to access data from anywhere, and how do you enable that? And they want their data to be they want to publish data to multiple channels. One of the interesting things what we have done is, in terms of trying to see that the user community is open to trying out new things now. Now they are able to see that because of the new normal, they need to embrace the digital transformation. So they are looking to invest some of their time in learning it. Like, for example, we are looking into a virtual desktop infrastructure. That would have been a big change if it was a normal time, but right now we do have the necessity. We are going through a massive backlog in our veterans record. We have to adapt to what our new requirements are. So we are trying to go through a virtual desktop infrastructure where people can just get on to an infrastructure where they can access the data. And our job is to use the technology that we currently have, is to readily make that available in a very lean and mean fashion so that they can start working. I think another thing we are looking at is, once we have the things like VDI, it also opens up a robotic process automation. Like, for example, if I have right now with the current infrastructure, I cannot bring in that RPA technology, because that means I have to bring in new infrastructure. But going to this virtual desktop infrastructure, I am just opening up a whole way of bringing in this transformation where I can bring in RPA and those kind of things without investing too much and risking a lot here, because I get to kind of test the waters on a particular use case, not risk too much, and then slowly build on that. I think this has really changed people's mindset in looking at new technology. I think we are definitely taking advantage of that. Thank you.
Well, excellent. And Shirian, do you have any insight that you could share with us on how to rapidly innovate your digital capabilities?
Absolutely. Innovation has been one of my portfolio, and we have learned a lot in the past 2 years. First, let me tell you, to rapidly innovate, you need a framework. You need to transport. When I say transport, any innovation you do, the outcome needs to really connect with your agency mission and objectives. And you need really a collaboration that's going on within your agency to transport, then ideate, experiment, and scale innovation, right? This is like the fundamentals how you do it. But to do this, you need a set of tools in your bag. And these might vary based upon your organization or your culture. But let me tell you what set of tools that we have adopted at the agency. So For us, the number one comes is a community of practice. This goes back to my point about trend spot and ideate. So we know when you put a group of business people, subject matter experts, technology folks, and the data expert together and have them collaborate on a regular basis, it becomes a nebula for innovation. And so we kind of started this community of practice called innovation management a few years ago that met on a voluntary basis on a regular frequency to brainstorm on some previously unsolvable problems and come up with ideas to solve them. So that is the first step. Then what happened was this inspired us to set up a platform how people could rapidly innovate. First thing what we did was we set up an innovation labs. Innovation Labs is a cloud-based platform where we have an SLA with our operational folks, how we can bring on some of the emerging capabilities into the hands of these innovators and have them experiment it, right? And this needs to be embraced by our security and how this platform is segregated from our regular platform and what kind of data that can go into it. All that was worked out. So we stood up this lab. Now we have the community of people who are going to use the labs, and also sometimes they come up with their own innovation through using their government furnished equipments outside of the lab. So now we have this innovation going on. And on one side, you have all these great innovation going on. And then the other side, you want to make sure these innovations are scaled up to the enterprise level capabilities. And then if you really draw the graph, and I don't know if you all are aware, we call it as valley of death. So what happens if you really look at all these innovations happening on one side and how many of them are really getting adopted, there's a steep curve or a valley-like curve, and then you would see most of the innovation dies out at the time when it really gets practically adopted. So our goal is to really raise the bar on this curve and increase more of these innovation products, take the side of operations and having it adopted enterprise-wide. So what we did was we started a marketplace portal called where it's called Hopper, where people can, the innovators can publish their innovations and NSF staff can subscribe to it and use it. And every time when a tool is published, we also have a maturity framework adopted on top of this portal where we call them as nascent, and the nascent has certain risks that goes with it. And then the mature is the next step where we say, okay, policy and legal kind of embrace it. And then we have a enterprise level where we have more than a few organizations using it. And then finally integrated, which is really integrated with our enterprise applications. So there's a maturity framework that we have developed and we have implemented on top of this portal to scale some of these innovations that can really reach to the desired endpoint in terms of enterprise-wide adoption. So these are our secret formulas, how our secret tools and formulas that how we have really inspired some of these innovation tactics and rapid scale innovation tactics that we have adopted at the agency.
Thank you, Shirian. And Ghulam, is there anything additional you would like to add to rapidly innovating digital capabilities?
Yeah, I just have a couple that I think complements very well to what Shirian said. I think we have a lot of technology right now, different kind of tools and everything. What I have seen is to really put you in an opportunity to rapidly innovate your digital capability is to invest in your staff, invest in your people, give them the opportunity to train and try to give them a safe place to experiment, to explore different technologies. What that happens is you create a sense of ownership and increase their capability to take chances and risk in a safe manner. And then when the opportunity comes along, when there is a need, you have a task, you have a workforce that's ready to take on the challenge immediately so that they can help you on the innovation journey. Because when you have a staff that is not like, it is siloed, you have not invested in training, and then you rapidly bring on a challenge, it's going to take some time for them to learn and come up to speed. So thereby you're basically you're losing all the time. But rather, I would advise, keep investing in your people and training, and have them try out different tools, provide them a safe way so that they can, in a secure manner, they can experiment. And then when the challenge comes along, I'm sure they will be ready for the challenge to help out your agency. So.
Well, thank you both for that incredible insight. And we are going to post our 2 poll questions now back to back. So make sure you respond to these. Poll number 1, what's the biggest internal or external change impacting your team this year? So please select from the following: securing a remote workforce, zero trust mandates, new compliance recs, new managerial leadership, cloud migration projects, third-party access, or other. Please respond to that. And then we're going to pop up poll question number 2 before we close out. All right, those are the results for poll question number 1. And poll question number 2, please. How important is digital transformation for strategic innovation within the future of the federal government? Please rate whether you feel it's very important or not so important. So thank you all for that. And real quickly, we are just out of time, but I just want to give the floor to our panelists for another minute or so. Shirian, what would you like to leave our audience with? A key takeaway or something that you would really like them to walk away from this discussion having, really driven home?
Absolutely. And I'm just going to second Ghulam here. So do not forget, as we go through your digital transformation, do not forget your people, your staff, your workforce. Find a way to take them alongside. If whatever you innovate, if your staff or your customers are not adopting, the whole innovation is waste of effort. So make sure you invest in them. And we have done something within the agency, like the community of practice, which also facilitates change champions that we bring in from the business side, who can be the enabler and being an early adopter in some cases of this innovation. And they just engage with the rest of the staff and then spread the news, and they bring in a lot of people in scaling our innovative efforts. So this is a secret formula that we use. Not this formula would work for every agency. We are kind of we are using this formula, but again, just going back to Ghulam or whatever he said, do not forget to take your staff alongside with you as you innovate. That is very key to your success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shirian. I love that. And Ghulam, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think we have kind of like touched on a really big momentum of various things like digital transformation, security, and digitization, and so on. I think we have to take up opportunity of this momentum and keep going. And one of the interesting things that I've seen is our users are ready for this. Like, for example, the question that I get asked is, if I can access my email from anywhere, what is stopping me from accessing my internal applications? If some of the systems that are already provided are secure, how do I make my internal applications secure and provide the same level of service? And I believe we have that momentum started right now, and that we just have to push through and finish that and be in a place where we can, take advantage of any kind of innovation opportunities that comes along. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much. This has been such a pleasure, and I hope to do it again soon. But now we will be hearing from our last emerging technology talk of the day, this time from Josh Broadbent. Josh is the RVP of Public Sector Solutions Engineering over at BeyondTrust. And Josh, the floor is all yours.
Hello, my name is Josh Broadbent. Welcome to the Path to Zero Trust. We're starting with identity security and least privilege. I appreciate you joining our session today. Just a little bit of background about me. I am the Senior Public Sector Security Director for BeyondTrust Software. I've been at BeyondTrust since 2018. Prior to that, I was at Quest Software as a Senior Solutions Architect. I have architected over 3 million user accounts for privilege and identity access solutions across my career. The beginning of my career started really young. I was 12. I founded an MSP, at which point I also achieved several industry certifications by the time I was 14, which apparently was a record. I went on from there to have my career in public sector, which is where I am today. Beyond Trust has over 1,100 employees in 18 countries, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, and I will let you read the rest of this slide, but I have to put it in because marketing tells me to. All right, so let's talk about zero trust security. It's a term that was coined by Gartner in 2010. After that, a few select PAM vendors specifically picked it up as part of their marketing collateral and their branding strategy. We've seen an explosion in its usage over the last couple of years, culminating in Biden's executive order in May, where he talks about wanting to rapidly implement a zero trust model across critical software. So what is zero trust? Why is it important to us? Well, in a traditional model, we kind of had this moat and castle view, right? So if something was inside our boundary, then we considered it safe. So as long as we kept threats outside, so as long as they were here, we were okay with that. What we began to figure out as we looked at this model is that in spite of our best attempts of switching and firewalls, we added firewalls that had deep packet inspection and IPS, that once somebody got inside, they were here. They had access to our network. We've seen several breaches over the last 18 to 24 months, some of which we still don't understand the damage that has been done or where they are. So we begin to take this posture of always verify, never trust. That's the zero trust model. I've had several conversations over the past 6-8 months with industry leaders, with government leaders, as I've sat on panels and had conversations. And one thing we all agree on is that zero trust doesn't have a silver bullet. This is a security posture. It's a method. It's a direction that we take our networks. It is absolutely not just one product that we can implement and boom, here we have zero trust. But let's talk about what zero trust is. The idea of zero trust is that we are continually defining security and continually verifying what's happening. So one thing you'll notice is that in this model, whether a user is accessing a privileged access workstation or they're on their normal desktop, wherever it is that they're going, their identity is going to constantly be re-verified. Since it's being re-verified every time they access a database or a different asset or a different application, then they can't move laterally because they're constantly being checked. Are they at the correct IP address? Do they have the correct authentication? Do they have the correct verification and multi-factor auth? All of these things happen because we no longer trust assets or users or identities, even if they're machine identities, inside our network for all time, right? We constantly re-verify, re-identify, re-authenticate these to make sure that they are the correct identity. So why a zero trust approach now? Like I said, the term was coined in 2010. We're in 2021, the age of the pandemic, if you want to call it that. Why is it important today? Well, number one, traditional perimeter-based defense is completely obsolete. That's what we just talked about. The idea that you can secure a perimeter and everything outside of that is not trusted and everything inside of it is trusted doesn't work when you constantly have the threat of breach. And once they get there, they don't always attack right away. They can be delayed timers. They can have all sorts of different malware tools that they inject or ingest into your network. So we can't do this anymore. We also have an ever-expanding attack surface. As the concept of privilege continues to expand beyond identities and heartbeats to APIs, to cloud, to machines, to application support, to Internet of Things, to SCADA devices. All of these devices become important, and that attack surface is constantly expanding. So in a traditional model, our only choice would really be to expand the inside of our network, right? To build a bigger moat or build a bigger castle. And when we do that, when we build that bigger castle, what we're doing is saying the attack surface inside that people have access to once they get there is now larger. The things that they can do is broader. That's what we've seen in several of the giant retail breaches, where someone breached an IoT network or a SCADA network. And then they used that to move laterally across the network until they found data or an asset that actually had value, and then they proceeded to compromise that. And of course, the last reason is clearly government mandates, as well as corporate standards. Biden made clear in his executive order and in the following documents that have been issued by NIST, the follow-up that we're getting from CISA is zero trust is absolutely the way that we have to move our security models away from that perimeter-based model to a zero trust approach in order to comply with the executive order, in order to comply with NIST new standards. This is what we have to do. The conversation of identity governance and where it fits into zero trust a lot of times can be broken down in the diagram that we have here. We generally, as a group, tend to agree on the business requirements and the business stakeholders. Where things start to get lost is what the technology partnerships look like between SIM and log monitoring and infrastructure security or MDM solutions. And then as we get further down the stack, we take a look at the disciplines that are required for an ICAM deployment. We look at things like identity management, attestation, role management, and data mining. We have these conversations, and the one that I specialize in and tend to have a conversation about is around privileged access management. So as we talk about privileged access management, even it gets broken down further. And we get to talk about components of what privileged access management is. People start at the very bottom and they talk about password storage and the idea that we are going to do shared password storage and password rotation, which begins to become password management, actually. The idea that we're going to check passwords in, we're going to check passwords out, we're going to automate the management and rotation of these passwords. We're going to look at things like session management. We're going to say, we want to know exactly what's happening, so we're going to record what's going on. And then we look at the broader concept of privilege management. This goes beyond managing credentials for privileged accounts, but actually goes into the concept that we want to remove privileges from Unix and Linux boxes. We want to remove admin privileges and elevated privileges from Windows and Mac boxes as well. And what we want to do is take those privileges away from the end user and begin to define a series of policies and roles where we extend those privileges to the application without actually extending them to the user. Like we've talked about so many times, auditing and reporting is a critical part of this. We have to know what our KPIs are. We have to be able to report on those. We have to do audit information, know where systems are coming from, where the elevation requests are coming from. We have to be able to audit all of this information. And we have to be able to take this and integrate it with other solutions in the stack, whether that's help desk and ticketing, whether that's MFA. We have to be able to integrate it with those stacks and then create this PAM governance solution where we have standards. So we understand inside an environment how our privilege is going to be handled, whether that's the actual accounts or whether that's the end users, or maybe it's the machine users or the IoT devices. How are we going to handle the users that have privilege or need privilege taken away? And that's when we begin to talk about privileged access management. That's when the conversation starts. What do we do with privilege? And if we don't know what we do with privilege, then we're essentially taking the rest of the ICAM solution and we're separating things out and we're separating these identities, but we're not actually building walls. We're building a zoo with no cages. I use the analogy sometimes that early in life, I dated a girl whose dad was a union painter. And I learned a lot about painting a room and a house, more than I probably ever need to know in my lifetime. But still, it's a thing that I learned. And one thing that I learned first is that he spent more time taping off the room to make sure that the corners and the edges and everything were just right than he did actually painting the room itself. Because we have to define the area, the role that we're going to have in order to have a perfect job. We have to define the area that animals live in the zoo, so we don't end up with lions and monkeys in the same cage, right? So in this case, what we're talking about is not just the definition of a role, because we can do that with an identity management solution, but how are we going to handle the privileges that that role is given so that we've defined that border and that cage and, hey, you can access this way. How are we going to do that? And that's where privilege access management comes in. And if we're not doing that, then we're essentially going back to the concept of perimeter-based security. We're not talking about identity as the new perimeter because we haven't fully established a boundary or a perimeter for our privileged accounts and for our privileged access. So even though there's a lot of places that talk about zero trust and they talk about the things they can do and they talk about network traffic and they talk about re-authenticating network traffic or they talk about identity, without privileged access management, zero trust doesn't exist. Without understanding how you're managing privileges and making sure that they're rotated, zero trust doesn't exist at all. Identity and access management is about defining the identity, right? It's not just about privilege, it's about all users. And that's important because every identity has access to something. I sat across the room from a government official one time that told me he believed privilege was every user because every user had access to data. Now that's a debate that I'm sure we could continue for a long time. But the truth is, the part about every user having access to data means that we have to establish and define their identity, ensuring that their entitlements and workflows all work together appropriately so that they can get their job done. Once you get to the PAM component, once you get to this component that we've outlined here, it's about securing credentials. It's about securing access. It's about securing those accounts and roles that have privileges. And really, the difference is between managing heartbeats and random accounts on a network and managing the functional and system accounts that manage a network. We're not talking about the privileges of users anymore. We're talking about the privilege of an application. Does the user have a normal experience? Does the admin have an experience that they think mimics having the permissions that they need without actually enabling those accounts to have those permissions? It's the concept of smart keys in cars, right? So I have 4 kids. My middle son especially, I would never trust handing the keys to a Corvette or a fast car. But with a smart key, I can set what speed he can go. So he gets the privilege of driving and thinks that he's having the experience of unrestricted driving, but there comes a speed where I have already defined the limit for him. So he's not going to drive on an Autobahn. He is going to drive on the country roads in Arkansas where I live. The Beyond Trust solution is designed to help protect against the threats we've been talking about, to help you achieve compliance and further support your mission to make sure that your data and your identities are protected. Our PAM provides powerful blended threat protection. We have the ability to do discovery, onboarding, so that we can know what you have. As a conversation went this week with a client, you don't know what you don't know. And that discovery of privileged assets and where it exists in your environment is super important to ensuring that you are implementing correctly that zero trust architecture and model. In addition to discovering them, we're going to be able to onboard all of that for you. We're going to be able to do it quickly. We're going to be able to do it role-based so that you understand who is slotted in what roles and what they have access to. The ultimate end goal here is to enforce that just-in-time privilege. We'd only want to give people privilege to exactly what they need for exactly how long they need it, and then we want to pull it away. On top of all that, we're providing remote access in a secure tunnel that doesn't always require a VPN for your contractors, for your remote workers. So again, we are preventing lateral movement. We are having the conversation about not having a traditional castle and moat perimeter, but an identity perimeter that verifies and grants you contextual access to exactly what you need or want. If you have further questions, my team is glad to help out. We have a few government assets that will be linked in this presentation. If you have any questions or you want to talk about how we can improve your cyber defenses, my email address is on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me. Glad to answer any questions that we have. Thank you for spending your time with me today, and I look forward to talking to you soon and continuing the conversation about how privileged access management can help enforce a zero trust architecture.
Thank you, Josh. Always a pleasure. Up next, we have another panel discussion, this time moderated by tech reporter over at FedScoop, Dave Neisifer. Dave, over to you.
Thanks, Kirsten. Before we begin, I want to just ask everybody to cam up on my panel, make sure we have everybody here. And then, great. Then before, also want to just let everybody know the audience can submit questions on their own in the Q&A section of this platform. We'll be going through them throughout the panel, so please get them in. I'll work them in as we go. Also remember to answer the poll questions as we go through them to ensure you get your CPE credits. There will be 2 of those throughout the discussion today. I'll now introduce our panelists. If you'd like to give a wave when I call your name, there's Scott Simpson, the digital transformation lead with the Department of Homeland Security, Kenneth Clark, Assistant Director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and Ram Thompson, Agency Chief Data Officer within the Deputy Digital Transformation Office at NASA headquarters. So I want to start by giving everybody a little chance to introduce themselves as well. So Scott, we'll start with you. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an update on yourself and what digital transformation efforts are going on at DHS.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for having me today, and good afternoon. My name is Scott Simpson. I'm the digital transformation lead actually for the DHS Procurement Innovation Lab, which sits underneath the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. I wear a lot of hats with that team. First and foremost, I'm an innovation coach. Back when the pill stood up about 7 years ago, we had this idea to transform procurement. And so we took all the best practices from Agile Scrum, and we tried to apply that to how teams purchase. Whether they're purchasing IT, digital services, or just mission-focused needs, they can apply these Agile principles to them, like having a biweekly Scrum, having brainstorming sessions and discovery, those kind of things. So my first job is to help teams from across all of the DHS components and some teams across the federal government to buy smarter, faster, and more efficiently. I'm also an instructor with the PIL. So next month we kick off our long-awaited follow-up to our hugely successful PIL Bootcamp, which we're calling PIL Bootcamp The Next Level. And finally, I'm the product owner for the Artificial Intelligence for Past Performance project and its successor, the Market Research Spinoff. So in just a few words, that project is aiming to infuse emerging technology like AI, like sentiment analysis, like natural language processing, all of those into how an acquisition professional would perform a past performance evaluation during a solicitation, which is a process that so far has been done the very same way since the contractor performance assessment reporting system was introduced to the federal workforce about 20 years ago. So looking forward to talking more about that.
Ken, we'll go to you next. What can you tell us about digital transformation at ICE?
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here with everyone. So I think everybody's aware that the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, we were started in 2003 with the Homeland Security Act. And really strengthening border security and illegal movement of people, goods, and funds. A number of initiatives are underway as part of digital transformation, developing some innovative tools for doing the immigration enforcement mission, our investigative mission. We've been starting up a body-worn camera program, an actual pilot to be able to monitor activities in the field. We also are working on various tools for improving the enrollment of non-citizens and working very closely with our partners across the department in electronic files for non-citizens, the historical files that we call A files. So a lot of innovation going there. Look forward to talking about some of the areas that my office, information governance and privacy office, is responsible for. We are working a number of the initiatives to protect privacy, Privacy Act of 1974 and Freedom of Information Act requirements to ensure that we can still share and be transparent, but also protect personal privacy and also the operations of the government, sensitive operations, but very much some of the similar items that Josh was talking about in the previous session. Look forward to the discussion.
Last but not least, Ron, what can you tell us about digital transformation at NASA?
Hey, Dave, good to see you. And Ken, Scott, privileged to be with you on this panel today. Many of you may have caught the keynote from Jill Marlowe today to talk about our digital transformation efforts. So there's a couple things that I want to highlight from that keynote. We are transforming our workforce and workplace. And I think this is the 5th year in earnest where we have had a digital transformation effort across the agency. The first couple of years were really the research phase. Sort of the mid phase of it when Jill and I got involved with this. We took a very collaborative approach, a coalition of the willing approach, and now we're in the more directive approach right now. So we're aligned with our OCIO colleagues to make sure we transform the organization using digital as a lever. So if you look at it, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is not only the tools, the compliance aspect of what we do, but it's the cultural, it's the workforce, it is making sure that what we're doing matches to mission and mission outcomes. So really, really nice to be with everyone today.
So I wanted to open up discussion with a question of just what do you all believe intelligent data management means to you, and how is it helping your agencies with their respective digital transformations? So Ron, maybe we can go in reverse order.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So, this is sort of beyond, tagging and classification of data itself. We are holistically across the enterprise. We are in our infancy in making sure that we know the universe of everything. So we do have pockets of excellence where we do have mainly our scientific data, our data that's available for our observation in our Landsat platform, for example, where we study the Earth and all that information we have about 50 years. So we're very well versed in that, but it is tagged for a specific use. It is classified for a specific use. So we are looking at holistically where do we really do intelligent data management, and our data, if you think about it, and in any organization, I'm sure you can make this argument. Longitudinally, if you look at it over time, the classification level or the intelligence or the importance of it does change, right? So, more mission, Ken, I'm sure, the ICE example in law enforcement, when that information is collected in the field, really, really sensitive. After the case is closed, maybe less, depending on the case. So we have to really look at the use case and how we're using these data and making sure that we have intelligent data management in place to know once we tag something, it may not always be that classification or tagged at that level over time, because it costs a lot, right? It costs a lot. We heard about our previous speaker talking about data access, right? It costs a lot to put those controls around these data. So what is really an approach where we can look at our critical and sensitive data over time and then track it and making sure that we have the right controls in place and we have data management plans that do have the right controls. So we're really thinking about this, and for NASA, it is mainly our operational data. And however, we do have some really important data to us around ITAR and our export control data. So that's really our most sensitive data sets for the organization.
Ken, does that sound like intelligent data management at ICE as well?
Absolutely. Just to build on what Ron was talking about, when it comes to data, they say data doubles every 2 years in the world, and it gets harder and harder with all this data to be able to really find, in some cases where you're doing investigations, that needle in the haystack. What's that core piece of information or data which is going to allow you to make a ruling or make a prosecution successful? And it's so important to have the tools, looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning tools that are going to help you to be able to sift through this vast amount of data that continues to grow. But I will say what's most important too is being able to use this data, but be able to protect it, particularly privacy information and then sensitive operations information, because lives are at stake with a number of the types of information that comes in. with the Freedom of Information Act, it's important for the government to be as transparent as possible to the general public. But we also have to be conscious of information that needs to be protected. And some of that information, of course, is classified information, which is protected under the exemptions. There could be attorney-client privilege information. There could be information, again, on the privacy side. From our side, we have a lot of law enforcement sensitive information that can affect whether somebody gets a fair trial, or whether some of our techniques and some of our sensitive sources, and some of these sensitive sources, human sources, which lives could be at stake. So it's important that you have a balance of knowing what information you need, where you're going to get it, but also how you're going to protect it, and putting the provisions in place. One of the things we're looking at is a compliance framework. I think it's important to look at not only each of the individual areas of concern, such as security and privacy and ethical use and civil rights and civil liberties use of information and legal use of information, but also realizing that these disciplines, you've got to have harmonization across them. What could be a problem in many cases is not just strictly a privacy problem. It could be a legal problem. It could be an issue of ethical use. So you have to really have all the offices that have these areas of responsibility working collaboratively together to ensure that, again, maximum use of intelligence data, but also protecting our sensitive and privacy information.
Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think one of the other things that's really important about keeping data correctly is training the users on how to input things, right? And the biggest problem we've had with CPARs is that the users don't see what the end point is. You never really go into CPARs to pull the information out, and when you do, it's really kind of hard to do that. And so users are putting all this information in, and they're getting frustrated that they don't see the output on the other side. And so, there's this old adage, garbage in, garbage out. And so they're getting garbage out, so they're just putting garbage in. And so that's what the CPARS AI project is all about, is trying to show them what AI and what all of this data can really mean for them. CPARS has all of the past performance information in there for every federal contract that's ever been awarded. It's got over 1 million records for hundreds of thousands of vendors. And right now it's just kind of sitting there. We're not really using it the way we should. And so if you infuse some AI in there, or some sentiment analysis, natural language processing, all that stuff, you can really start to reap the benefits of it. And we feel like once you start to show people that this data is being used, then people will start to say, hey, if I'm getting use out of this, maybe I ought to take a few more extra minutes and put in some good data here. And whether that's adding a few more sentences, or whether it's things like putting things in the right field. These are all common problems that we have with structured and unstructured data sets. And it's all about, making sure you focus on the user a little bit to understand what they're getting out of it, so what they put into it too.
Now I wanted to take a minute to do the first poll question now. What is your top concern for failure to execute on transformation efforts? Impact to customer user experience, increased costs to taxpayers, internal workflow inefficiencies, negative impact on employee morale, other. And if we could get the results on that. That leads to my next question for the panel. Just first off, it looks like impact to customer user experience and then internal workflow inefficiencies are the top two here, followed by negative impact on employee morale. But I wanted to ask the panel, what do you see as the biggest hurdles to your digital transformation, and how are you addressing these hurdles? Does it sort of align with what we saw in that poll? And anyone can fire away here. Can maybe. Oh,
I guess Dave, we'll go in order, or gentlemen, if you want to jump in, we'll just go in the order. So interesting. The poll sort of validates, I think, some of the thinking that we've had. Is and also to build upon Scott's comments as well. I think the biggest challenge that we're seeing quite frankly, is for folks to understand the why, right? So Scott, I don't know, we always sort of in government, and I have over 30 years experience in a lot of different places right now, but we always know we have bad performers, and it doesn't seem like anything is being held accountable for the bad performers. And we know we have this sort of compliance thing we have to do for CPARs, right? But why do we still have bad performers? Why are we still not getting, the value that we need or feel? So I really like the results of that poll. And to me, it is building on the why, so Scott, I love your role, really educating, sort of explaining the why and educating the use. That's absolutely critical for folks to, to understand why are you doing something. It's not just putting in a report or making a deadline for a report, but what is the value behind there? What are we really getting from it? So I think, Dave, the poll sort of, to me, revalidates what I think we know instinctively, organically. So I think it's pretty much in alignment with, with our thinking anyway. So Ken or Scott, you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just add, it's important to use the lessons learned, what we've learned from the past. I mean, again, ICE was established with the Department of Homeland Security because of the tragic events of 9/11. And we've learned so much on the threats that are out there, and how that modifies our missions, and how that modifies our processes, and also modifies the data. So I think transformation, you want to use what you've learned in the past, and use that to make things better for the future. And a lot of that, again, when you're looking at some of the technologies that we have out there, artificial intelligence and such, one of the threats to AI in many ways is having bias in the data that goes in there. I mean, it's and you need to learn, well, why do we have the data structured the way it is, or how did we gather that data that we're putting into these tools that are out there, and learning, well, why did it fail here, and we don't want to make it fail again when we put it into an AI or other type of resource. So really, it's important to use what you've learned in the past for moving forward.
I'll follow up with Ken and Ron made great points, and I think the biggest thing is that communication and education. I'll go back to that. So with the Procurement Innovation Lab, we coach teams on how to do things more efficiently, faster, with a better output. We've been at this for 7 years, and in 7 years, we've managed to get 1/3 of acquisition professionals to adopt some of our principles. Not all of them, just some of them. And we're talking about faster, more efficiently, with better outcomes. That should be a no-brainer. 7 years, 1/3 of the people are doing it now. And we've got these results. We do a survey every year to see what that trend is with people who use innovative procurement techniques. So it's really just communicating that out, understanding, hey, why don't you want to use a technique that is faster, better, smarter to use, whether it's a procurement innovation technique, whether it's emerging technology, whether it's digital transformation. It's all about understanding the user, communicating that out, and getting in touch with them, really making that connection. You can't just, email blast. You need to find out, what is that group thinking? What is their hurdle, right? What's their roadblock? And then try to address that.
Now I'll ask for the second poll question here. How familiar are you with your agency's strategies for digital transformation and application modernization? Very, moderately, or not familiar at all? And let's get the responses on that. All right, so far and away, moderately familiar is the leader here. 65% of people said moderately familiar, followed by I don't know, and then not familiar at all. So my next question for the panel is do you have a strategy in place for digital transformation or accessing data and protecting your most important data?
You want to go in reverse order, Scott? You want to take it? Let's shake it up
Sure,
a little bit. Let's go.
Change it up, right?
Thanks.
So in phase 1 of the CPROJ project, we were using just DHS data we were using a lot of DHS volunteers from all of our components like ICE, CBP, FEMA. There was this real kind of fear that we were going to overtune to just DHS data. And so we reached out, and over about a year, we built some partnerships. And so we actually had formal partnerships with 9 agencies for phase 2. Some of them contributed funds to help us along, but they all contributed volunteers to help with discovery, with user testing, just with kind of general thoughts. They also contributed their data. So in the phase 1, we just had 1,500 DHS records. And in phase 2, we had 50,000 records from across 10 different agencies. And it was this real kind of nice microcosm of the federal government. We had some law enforcement, we had we had some external, like international, we had defense, we had NASA, which is out of this world. So we built like this really nice partnership to get the word out. And that's how we really addressed, we're trying to build this once for the whole federal government. We don't want to piecemeal it and have a DHS one and then a NASA one and a DOD one. We want this once that can be used by any CPARS user. And so to do that, we were trying to build this partnership of all these agencies. And so we get buy-in, stakeholders, and so we're building the right tool for everybody so that they want to use it at the end when we're done with it all.
Yeah, just to add, and I noticed that there was a question about how you can get to why before starting a digital transformation project. And I really would say the answer to that is going back to really ensuring you have a good solid strategy. And at ICE, we have a data strategy that was developed in a very collaborative fashion. We have a digital transformation strategy in a collaborative fashion across the business owners as well as the technology teams that we've got. But there's also a close collaboration that we have at the department level with the Data Governance Council and the Chief Information Officers. And all of that's, all these strategies are tied to the organizational strategy. So just as I mentioned, the data strategy that we have and the transformation strategy, those all were derived from the broader strategic plans for the agency. So that way you can see a direct tie and correlation of your projects to the mission and the focus areas that the agency have. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, Ken, I think for us, it's, it's really that linkage to mission outcomes, sort of the why we're doing this. I think when people hear data strategy, they think about the records aspect of data, right? They think about the data elements. Do we have record retention? Do we have all those things you have to do from a compliance point of view? But I'm not surprised, Dave, at the results of the poll. I think this is, the CDO and data as a strategic asset is very new to the government. I mean, just 2017 been put in place statutorily, but we at NASA are taking what we call the light, steady, consistent approach, right? We're not coming in and having a heavy-handed compliance aspect. We do have compliance is important, so I want to be very clear on this point. Absolutely, but there's a way. And Ken, you're sort of mentioning that linkage to both governance within and what the plan is from data. That linkage is important. And I think for us, we need that steady drumbeat. The culture of NASA is an engineering culture. It is a culture of openness. We like to be very transparent in what we do, but that takes time. So that consistent pressure, having a data strategy. So not surprised. I think that poll could be a result of what we see here. Not that there's anything wrong with the data strategy, not that it's not answering what it needs to, but it needs to be consistent, steady, and linked in, to Ken's point, Scott, bringing the people in and understand where they fit in the picture. So all these aspects are absolutely critical to make sure we keep the light pressure and continue to move forward.
Now, we do have other audience questions coming in. We have one that asks, how can blockchain help in digital transformation? My AFCEA subcommittee chair told us about LootNex, a blockchain-based company I am sharing so that it may be useful for you in this digital transformation process. Are any of you in your digital transformations using blockchain in any way?
That's the one that we're not using. We've got AI and sentiment analysis and natural language processing, but we haven't figured out blockchain yet for how to incorporate that. Next time.
We're exploring that. You know, one of the areas on privacy and being able to protect sensitive information. You know, the technology has merit to look at, but again, still going through, and a lot of it is going to be, well, what are the requirements and what are the guidelines that we want to have so that we can properly do the acquisition later on, should we decide to do that.
Yeah, we're seeing it as well with chain of custody, making sure our IP is protected with our commercial partners, how we bring data back and forth, you know, from space back, right? How we need to make sure the quality. So we believe there's a quality play in there, but it's really, really early, Dave, on this to really give you a use case. But I think it is promising.
Leave it to NASA to talk about bringing data back to space. I mean, like, one up everybody here, Ron.
Sorry, Scott, but your work is probably the most critical thing, working with the people. So not taking anything away. That's extremely valuable. And procurement is how we launch into space through procurement. Definitely important.
There you go.
Well, on that positive note, we are just about out of time. We do have one more question on will this recording be available for review. I'm going to leave that to Kirsten to answer in her wrap up, flipping it back over to her.
Yep, it will be available for review. And that reminds me, go subscribe to our YouTube channel. So just look up ATARC on YouTube and subscribe. You'll get all the notifications for when we upload. On that note, thank you all to our panelists and Dave for moderating. And I would like to give a special thanks to our partners again over at ServiceNow, Red Hat, Zscaler, Beyond Trust for partnering with us today. And as a final poll question, please answer whether you would like your CPE credit certification emailed to you. And with that, I want to thank everyone at home for joining us. Great audience questions, and we hope to see you at our next event. So bye. Thank you.